Chapter 14. The Monster Within. Upon Cerberus's insistence, preparations for the executions were undertaken immediately. The prince argued that the commander had well established his ability to escape from prison, and that to put off the fulfillment of his sentence for even a day was far too dangerous. Ectheon, completely drained by loss and betrayal, no longer had the will to check his impetuous brother. And it was so that only mere hours after being condemned, Adril and Eberud were led out into the square before the gates of the king's castle to face the executioner's blade. It was Cerberus's desire to draw as much public attention to the event as possible to instill fear in anyone who might be loyal to the fallen commander. Through the efforts of his agents, the prince managed to muster a fairly large crowd in the square. A hastily constructed dais had been erected in front of the castle gates. On it stood a figure dressed in black. As was the custom, a hooded mask covered the executioner's face. In his hands was a newly sharpened axe, the instrument intended to bring an abrupt end to the accused criminal's treachery. King Ectheon also stood on the dais. Though it was the last place in the world he wanted to be, Ectheon felt it was his duty to preside over such a weighty affair. Many in the crowd remarked at how haggard and morose the young king looked. Cerberus, on the other hand, proved to be quite the contrast to his brother. He stood tall and proud on the platform. If any doubted whether the accused deserved what was awaiting them, Cerberus's cold, confident demeanor was a signal to all that justice truly was being served. Errol was not present. Adril had been his best friend, and he could not bear to stand by and watch him die. He could not bring himself to believe that Adril was guilty. Yet he also did not believe what Adril said about Cerberus. The only explanation he could find was that his friend had been fooled and manipulated. The episode at the inn in Edgewood still bothered Errol. Why had Adril met with Silas? Was Silas the source of the outlandish accusation that Adril had levied against Cerberus? If so, why would Adril believe him? The answers to those questions were about to be sent forever beyond Errol's reach by the executioner's axe. Trumpets blared to signal the commencement of the execution. Errol, who had been wandering aimlessly through the halls of the castle, found himself in a room with a rather good view of the grim proceedings. The young prince stared out the window with a heavy heart. Though he did not want to look, his eyes were immediately drawn to the raised platform before the gates of the castle. As Adril stood silently awaiting his fate, Errol was struck by how noble the fallen commander looked, even in disgrace. And yet again the prince was overcome by the feeling that a great wrong was about to be committed. Errol tore his gaze away from the dais and looked out over the crowd. Cerberus and his soldiers had driven many of them into a fury of bloodlust. Yet there were others whose faces bore the same expression of grief and confusion that Errol's wore. But Errol's expression quickly changed as his eyes fell upon one particular figure in the crowd. A cloaked individual had taken a position on the base of the monument, in the center of the square, apparently to get a better view of the event. Something about the person immediately raised an alarm in Errol. The prince sharpened his keen eyes and quickly confirmed his fears. It was Silas. Errol immediately raced toward the castle gates. He knew that he did not have much time. Something terrible was about to happen. Neither Ectheon nor Cerberus noticed the cloaked figure standing in the center of the square. Their eyes were fixed on Adril. As was Cerberus's wish, the former commander was brought forward first. Adril stood resolutely before the executioner. His wrists were bound, but he did not look like a criminal. His demeanor was one of quiet strength. He did not take his eyes off of Cerberus and Ectheon even as he kneeled before the chopping block. Cerberus nodded, and the executioner raised his axe. Silence reigned in the city as the deadly blade hung at the top of its arc. But then two noises broke the silence. The first was the snap of a bowstring, and immediately following that was the sound of an arrow piercing the thigh of the executioner. The would-be death dealer dropped his axe and clutched at his wounded leg. At that very moment, Errol raced through the gateway of the castle and pointed to the center of the square. "It is Silas," he shouted. All eyes turned to the base of the monument. The infamous henchman of Dyax's had already prepared another arrow, and was taking aim at the dais yet again. He let the arrow fly, and it reached its mark. The target was the chest of Prince Cerberus. The wounded prince fell to his knees. He clutched the deadly shaft with his hand as a trickle of blood ran down from the corner of his mouth. He then collapsed entirely. Ectheon kneeled down and cradled his brother in his arms. Cerberus stared up at him blankly. There was nothing that could be done. Cerberus was dead. Ectheon stood up in a rage and drew his sword. He lunged at Eadril. "This is your doing." Ectheon roared. "Yes, it is," Eadril admitted. "And I did it for you." Ectheon's face was a twisted landscape of anguish, rage, and disbelief as he asked, "Why?" "Turn around and you will see," Eadril said. Ectheon turned around and saw what everyone in the crowd was now staring at in silent awe. A black vapor was rising from Cerberus's mouth. The dark mist was taking form. With each passing moment, the monstrous apparition became more corporeal, until finally the true image of the demon Dyaxis stood before them. The demon towered over Ectheon. Its skin was the color of burnt flesh, and its eyes were like glowing coals. Enormous bat-like wings extended from its back, and its lengthy tail lashed like a whip. "Such a pity," Dyaxis said as he glanced down at Cerberus's corpse. "I had grown quite comfortable in your brother's skin." The demon's words pushed Ectheon past his breaking point. The king raised his sword and charged at Dyaxis. "Ectheon, no!" Eadril shouted. But Ectheon was deaf to the commander's warning. He struck at the demon with a blind fury. Dyaxis used Cerberus's sword to fend off the king's blows. The ferocity of their duel cleared the dais and sent the crowd scurrying away in fear. "Fool," Dyaxis sneered as he struck back at the king. "You cannot defeat me." "That may be," Ectheon said, "but as long as there is life in my veins, I will not stop trying." The battle between the demon and the king moved from the dais out into the square. Meanwhile, Errol approached Eadril and Eberud and untied their wrists. "We must help Ectheon," Errol said. "He is beyond our help," Eadril said gravely. "Mortal weapons cannot destroy a demon." "Then what can we do?" Errol asked desperately. "Nothing," Eadril replied. Ectheon fought valiantly against Dyaxis, but it soon became apparent that he was no match for the demon's supernatural strength. With a crack of his whip-like tail, Dyaxis cut open a 2-inch gash on the right side of Ectheon's face. The demon followed this painful distraction with a mighty blow that knocked the sword from the king's hand. Ectheon dove to the ground to grab his weapon, but the demon was too quick. Dyaxis stepped on the king's hand, pinning it to the ground just inches from the sword. The demon then placed his blade under Ectheon's chin. "It hurts, does it not?" Dyaxis said as he stared down at Ectheon. "Not just the pain you feel in your hand right now, but the pain that comes from knowing that you are utterly defeated. And you are defeated. Of that, there is no doubt. With one quick move, I could end your life right now. I suspect that a part of you wishes that I would. It is hard living without her, and you know it will not get any easier. That is why I will let you live, Ectheon, at least for a little while longer. I will let you live, so that you might be tormented by the memories of all that you have lost, and the knowledge that one day soon I will come to take away all that you have left. I will let you live so that you might die a little bit more each day. And in the end, you will long for the release that I have denied you this day." The demon then bounded up into the air and took flight. Ectheon rose to his feet and watched as Dyaxis' image grew fainter and fainter in the eastern sky. Consumed by bitterness and rage, the king was prepared to mount his horse and chase the demon to the ends of the earth. But the sound of a familiar voice put his irrational impulse in check. "I know what you desire to do, and I will tell you what I told Cerberus on that fateful day when he surrendered his life to vengeance," Eadril said as he walked up behind Ectheon. "Do not hunt down the demon. You will find only your own destruction, just as Cerberus found his." "I know," Ectheon said in resignation. "Only now, do I understand the pain that consumed my brother." He then turned and faced the Aedral. "I am sorry for what I put you through. You need not apologize for what any rational person would have done in your place," Aedral said. "The demon's plot was cleverly crafted. Even I was fooled until almost the very end." "How did you know about what Diaxes did to Cerberus?" Ectheon asked. "I told him," Silas said as he approached Aedral and the king. "I was there when Diaxes broke Cerberus, when I caught a glimpse of the true face of the monster with whom I had aligned myself. I renounced my allegiance to Diaxes and fled from Palacaid. I turned from the path of a mercenary to that of a monk. But as part of my transformation, I knew that I had to try to make amends for the sins of my past. I sought out Aedral to warn him of Diaxes' plan. I was suspicious of him, to say the least," Aedral admitted. "It had been my belief that Salacia was Diaxes' agent and that Cerberus was merely under her spell. But then I remembered what you told me, Ectheon, about what your father said on his deathbed. He was not warning you about your brother Cerberus. He was warning you about the demon disguised as Cerberus." "Yes, it all makes sense now," Ectheon said. "But what I do not understand is how we can ever defeat Diaxes. I know that my grandfather destroyed the demon Azumen with the demon's bane, but that sword is hopelessly lost." "Then we must find it," Aedral said. "You make it sound so simple," Ectheon said. "I would have thought that those seeking the sword would have looked in every possible place by now. There's one place where they have not looked, a place where they dared not look," Aedral said darkly. "Where is this place?" Ectheon asked. "You have been there before," Aedral said. "It is the well that serves as Diobor's prison beneath the White Mountains. But if that is the case, then the sword has passed forever beyond our reach," Ectheon said in despair. "We can reach it if we dare," Aedral said. "I will find the sword, Your Majesty. It is our only hope."